Most people know that Coca-Cola used to have a little bit of cocaine in it. But what most people didn't realise, me included until recently, is how it got there in the first place. And the really shady story about why it suddenly disappeared. You'd think it'd be something to do with the law. Sure, that is part of it. But Coca-Cola chose this on their own. And it has more than a hint of racism about it as to why they did that. First, let's start with the story of the drink itself. Dr. John Stith Pemberton was a Confederacy soldier, so you already know this is going to be a wild ride. He got injured fighting in the Civil War, after it had actually already finished. And to manage his pain, he was given a drug called morphine. You know, perfectly not an opioid, not addictive, morphine. He gets addicted, and after the war, he moves to Atlanta. While he's there, he discovers the new and innovative drug, cocaine. So he tries it. Maybe it will help with his morphine addiction. And it does, surprisingly. So now he's convinced that cocaine is a force of good, and he thinks it can help other people who suffer from nervousness. Now, nervousness is an interesting little diversion we need to take ourselves through. Interesting because it's something that doesn't really exist anymore, but it was a big deal in middle-class America in the late 19th century, which is exactly the period we're talking about. It was basically a mix of fatigue, anxiety, and headaches. And doctors of the time thought it was related to how people were living their lives. You know, life was becoming so much more complex and stressful. And the treatment of this had something to do with Coca-Cola, which we'll get back to in a minute. But in general, what treatment you were given depended on if you were a man or a woman, especially if you were treated by Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell. For women, you were told to relax, don't do anything, just be a housewife. That is the treatment. Everything will be solved by that. How coincidental that a man came up with that. But if you were a man, Silas Mitchell told you to go west and find yourself. And that's nervousness. And it's important because it kind of gives us the context of the environment that Coca-Cola was rising in. It was targeted at middle-class people. Lots of people were feeling this way, that modern life was leaving them behind or making them feel strange. I mean, we wouldn't know anything about that, would we? But this is where we get into the invention of the drink. So Dr. John Stith Pemberton has just discovered that cocaine has helped him get over his morphine addiction and generally made his life better. And he thinks he can help other people by introducing it into their lives via a new product. And what he comes up with is very interesting. Not Coca-Cola, but cocaine-infused wine. Yes, you heard that right. Wine in cocaine. I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised I've never heard of that in any other context apart from the invention of Coca-Cola, but alas, that's where I heard it first. He's invented this wine. He starts selling it in Atlanta. But it's the worst possible timing. Why? Don't know if you know about this thing called the temperance movement. In Atlanta, they move early. This is something we mostly think about in the 1920s. But here we are in the 1880s, and Atlanta has banned alcohol. So Stith Mitchell has had a bit of a rough time here. He's invented something new. It probably would be popular, who knows, but he can't sell it, at least not in Atlanta. So he could either cut off the place that he lives and works in and sell that elsewhere, or he has a few other options. He could go fully illegal and bootleg the alcohol with some cocaine. Remember, the cocaine is actually the legal thing here. Or he could give up. But he chooses neither. Instead, he invents a new drink, soda infused with cocaine. And that's our Coca-Cola. So, Coca comes from the plant that cocaine comes from, and that's in the drink. And the cola of Coca-Cola comes from the cola nut, which is something that comes from Africa that contains a lot of caffeine. Overall, it's being marketed as a medicinal drink. It's going to make you feel great. So being in Atlanta, he launches it there first, into the popular soda fountains that have started to pop up. They proved to be incredibly popular. But then, in 1888, Dr. John Stith Pemberton dies. What now for Coca-Cola? Its inventor dead so soon. Luckily for the drink, and I guess for us, He sold the company for the equivalent of $800,000 to Asa Griggs Chandler, a local businessman, and he's determined to make it into a big hit. The drink continues to do well and spread, but so does cocaine in general. It's not just popping up in random soda drinks, like in Coca-Cola. It's generally taking a lot of America by storm, especially the middle class, but not just the middle class either. So the Civil War had ended slavery, technically, but not necessarily the brutal work that was fundamental to slavery. Cruelly long and dangerous shifts were still very common, with people working well over 12 hours a day. And a certain drug, e.g. cocaine, is quite good at giving you boosts of energy. So if you've been working 12 hours already and you've still got 7 hours left, cocaine is going to come in invaluable. And that's exactly what happens. It becomes wildly popular with former slaves and black people in general. The use of cocaine by black people spreads all over the South. I mean, it's where slavery was big, right? But as cocaine is spreading, so is the panic about who is using it and the effects it's having on them. People start to wonder if those people are safe to have cocaine, if their minds are capable of handling it. And this is exacerbated with a couple of riots that are blamed on black people having taken cocaine. And the fact that black people are now using cocaine, and there's a panic spreading about it, means that cocaine becomes less popular, especially with the white middle class. And this is where the movement to remove cocaine from Coca-Cola begins. You can see now, it has more than a hint of racism about it. In 1901, the Atlanta Constitution linked the dangers of black cocaine use with soft drinks that contain the drug, which it claimed could unconsciously cultivate a drug habit. The movement to make cocaine illegal picks up steam. Then there are some violent incidents where cocaine is involved, prompting this famous New York Times headline: "Negro cocaine fiends are a new Southern menace." All of this is happening while Asa Griggs Chandler is trying to spread his new drink all around the USA. And so he has a decision to make. Obviously, he chooses to remove it. But you have a problem there, right? Like, it's in the name, Coca-Cola. It's gone from a wonder drug that was part of your marketing to now being something you want to distance yourself from. Let's finish that article from earlier. That same year, Chandler called for a change to the Coca-Cola formula, replacing cocaine with heavier doses of sugar and caffeine, and started denying that the soda had ever contained cocaine to begin with. So they could remove the Coca, but what about the name? They decided to do a little trick and remove the active part of the Coca plant and keep the inactive part, which is essentially worthless. But they do all this before cocaine is even made illegal. They get ahead of the game, probably because Asa Griggs Chandler was a well-connected businessman who probably had some influence over what happened at government level. Eventually, in 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act makes it illegal. When it is made illegal, you would think that something that made the import of it illegal would make it hard to get hold of the inactive ingredient as well as the active, right? And you are right, because the law would stop you importing it. Unless you're a well-connected businessman and you got a special import license to allow you to keep importing it. And not only that, you also get special permission eventually to grow cocaine on Hawaii, just for yourself. All for something that literally does nothing in the drink by this stage. Very odd, but those are the decisions that Coca-Cola have made. But as we know, Coca-Cola already have this special license. Now that it's illegal, it then becomes more expensive on the black market, which means the working class black people in particular that were relying on it for their work can't really afford to buy it anymore, which means that it gains its status again amongst the upper classes. It's now a popular drug for mostly rich people. And that special import license for the Coca plant, only Coca-Cola are given it amongst their rivals. And none of their competitors are. Pepsi exists at this time, but it's marketing itself as the opposite of Coca-Cola. So no caffeine, no cocaine, nothing. Not even any sugar or anything. Don't quote me on that. Coca-Cola gets to keep the hint of cocaine without any of the bad reputation of it. Publicly at this time, they're saying it isn't in the drink at all, which is a lie, but kind of true at the same time. So, and to this day, Coca-Cola contains the non-active Coca, with a little bit of racism, classism, and the wonderful world of 19th century nervousness. It's how Coca-Cola gained and then rapidly lost cocaine in the drink. And speaking of nervousness, here's me asking you for something. So I've recently started a Patreon. If you can afford to spare $3 a month, then that's all it takes to get exclusive content, e.g. in the middle of this video. The bit about nervousness probably felt a bit too abrupt. That's because there is a slightly longer story there that isn't directly tied to Coca-Cola, and if you join the Patreon, you'll be able to find out a bit more. There's about another minute there that you may or may not find interesting. And for my previous video too, there's another minute and a half, I think, that you can see as a result of joining the Patreon. There's no obligation to keep your subscription. If you just want to join, see a couple of things and then leave, that's entirely on you, but it would be appreciated. See you later.